Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our Daily Penguin. This is a waddle through all the penguins that I've had, all the penguins that I currently have, and all the penguins that I'm ever going to have. And today we are talking about an old friend, my oldest friend, Herodotus. Here in the Penguin Classic Deluxe edition of the translation of noted Spider-Man actor Tom Holland. This has the French flaps and the deckled edges. It's a lovely floppy Penguin Deluxe edition that has extensive maps. There are all sorts of maps in the back, which you kind of sort of need with Herodotus, and you don't always get them. It has an extensive index, all sorts of endnotes, a very good introduction, a very good and very interesting translator's introduction, and it updates a long tradition that Penguin Classics has had with Herodotus, that is typical with any publisher who's going to keep coming out, because they're going to stay in business doing classics, which is you're going to have a translation, and it'll get talked about, and maybe it'll be standard, maybe it'll be in bookstores, but it's eventually going to start to creak, usually. And so in your misguided zeal, you are going to update that translation. You are going to haul in Michael Grant to brush off the creakiness of Robert Graves. You shouldn't do that, obviously. The translation is a work of art in itself. You shouldn't do that any more than we now frown on the procedure of putting fig leaves on naked statues in museums. If you walked into a major museum and saw a statue from antiquity with a fig leaf covering the genitals, you'd be outraged. You'd want your money back. It's the same thing. I understand. I think, the practical nature of publishers to do that. It's probably cheaper to haul in a classicist to brush up and slightly update an older translation than it is to commission a new translation and build it up and give it its own livery and everything. So I understand that. Probably also you maybe are acting out of a small amount of sentimentality, since the older translations may have their fans. The older translation involved for Penguin definitely has a fan in me. It was Aubrey de Sélincourt's translation from almost a century ago. And that Penguin did very well by them. They brought it out as several mass market paperbacks. Then they updated it. There's an update on those shelves, and I think they might have updated it a second time. But eventually they thought, get a famous classicist to do a new translation. And naturally, I was all over it like yellow on butter. I knew this was coming ahead of time. I reviewed it at great length. That review is gone from the internet. I think it's gone from the internet. That's the way when you hear the rule of thumb that on the internet everything is forever. Yeah, that's true, except for my writing. My writing appears on the internet, has its day in the sun, and then is unfindable. But I was very intrigued to note the differences here. There are ways in the big muscular parts of Herodotus where a translator is not going to make that much of a difference. Usually, unless the translator is inept. But if they're inept, they're not going to get past the censors at the publisher. So if you know your stuff, you're probably not going to make that much of a difference. This is not one of those authors where translations will be radically different from each other in the big muscular elements. But so much of the charm of Herodotus is in the stuff that isn't big. So much of the charm of this author is in his, what we could definitely call his conversational bits. So I naturally went at this critically, wondering, well, what of those bits are you preserving? What are you maybe enhancing? What are you doing for the modern era? This is the Herodotus for the modern era. Firmly belongs to the 21st century. And I thought, when I went into this originally, that surely the thing that you would do would be to simplify it, because the 21st century is astonishingly stupid. So I thought the first thing you would do would be to simplify this work. Remove the layers, remove the nuance, remove anything like that, and make it very direct. Make it as if Herodotus were talking to you. Herodotus often does feel that way, so it wouldn't be a totally unjustifiable editorial decision. But I thought we would test it out. I love to do this anyway, this little exercise comparing translations. I thought we would test it out. So we will leave the Penguin Classic Deluxe Herodotus for last. And first, we will go back over a century for one of my favorite translations of Herodotus by George Rawlinson. So we'll just read the opening of this book and see how it changes over time until we get to Tom Holland. So this is how Rawlinson starts his translation, which did really well when it came out in his day. So we are roughly equidistant between translations. The first book, entitled Clio. These are the researches of Herodotus of Halicarnassus, which he publishes in the hope of thereby preserving from decay the remembrance of that which men have done, and of preventing the great and wonderful acts of the Greeks and the barbarians from losing their due meed of glory, and withal to put on record what were the grounds of the feud between the Greeks and the Persians. In other words, the barbarians here being. According to the Persians best informed in history, the Phoenicians began the quarrel. This people, who had formerly dwelt on the shores of the Erythraean Sea, and here we are told in parentheses that means the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, have migrated to the Mediterranean and settled in the parts which they now inhabit, and began at once, they say, to adventure on long voyages, freighting their vessels with the wares of Egypt and Assyria. They landed in many places on the coast, among the rest at Argos, which was then preeminent above all the other states, including now under common name of Hellas. Okay, so that's very strong. I think you would agree. That's very strong and very grand. And also it tells us a lot about Herodotus. What is Herodotus doing in the very beginning of his book? First of all, he's identifying himself and saying that what he is doing is tracing the roots of a modern problem into the past. What are the roots of the antagonism between these two great adversaries? And how do I know that? And why am I talking about it? Notice that we're told that he has consulted the Persians who are best acquainted with the matter. A very present tense thing to do. Notice that he says that a lot of the things that he's talking about now are still true. They were born in the past, but they are still true today. It immediately, in other words, cinches up the reader with the past. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like you're talking about history, and it doesn't feel like you're hearing from someone who's going to tell you about history, even though the opening book is inscribed to Clio, the muse of history. You still don't feel that way. So that's how Rawlinson starts his. Now we'll move forward, in a whole generation, to Aubrey de Sélincourt and see how he starts his Penguin Classic translation. Herodotus of Halicarnassus. His researches are here set down to preserve the memory of the past by putting on record the astonishing achievements both of our own and of other peoples, and more particularly to show how they came into conflict. Notice right away, it changes right away. There is no reference to Clio. There is no invocation of any kind to a muse. And also, barbarians is gone. Anyway, learned Persians put the responsibility for the quarrel on the Phoenicians. These people came originally from the so-called Red Sea. Another change in nomenclature there. And soon they had penetrated to the Mediterranean and settled in the country where they are today. They took to making long voyages, loaded with Egyptian and Assyrian goods they called at various places along the coast, including Argos, in those days the most important place in the land now called Hellas. And for the Erythraean Sea, we get a footnote. But we don't get it in the text where Herodotus puts it. It's separate. So Aubrey de Sélincourt is clearly trying to clean up the details of this narrative. Does he work for you? I always say on this channel, and I've said long before there was a booktube, that there is no such thing as going by authority when it goes to translations. You're going to be living with this strange work written in a language that you don't know, probably from a culture long gone. You're going to be living with it for a long time. So it really doesn't matter whether or not you're getting what Debrett's Peerage says is the best translation. You have to pick the translation that works best for you. And then once you get through the work and hopefully love it, you can try all the other translations, or you can teach yourself the original language. So does that work for you? It's a lot less ornate. It's a lot less grand. Does it make Herodotus feel more immediate? I think probably that was its goal. And if that was its goal for Aubrey de Sélincourt writing his translation in the time of your grandparents, it must be even more so for Tom Holland. who has made a career out of popularizing the classics. So we can assume that his book one will be even more approachable. Let's see what it is. First of all, no invocation, no anything for Clio. Herodotus from Helicarnassus here displays his enquiries that human achievements may be spared the ravages of time, and that everything great and astounding, and all the glory of those exploits which serve to display Greek and barbarians alike to such effect, be kept alive, and additionally, and most importantly, to give the reasons they went to war. Let's keep going. Well-informed Persians commentators pin the blame for the clash on the Phoenicians. These were the people who originally came from the Red Sea, as we term it, to this sea of ours, and no sooner had they settled in the country which remains their homeland up to the present day than they began investing heavily in the long-distance shipping business, exporting goods from Egypt and Assyria to a wide variety of markets. Preeminent among these was Argos, the city which at that time was the leading power, by any reckoning you care to mention, in the land which is now called Greece. Not Hellas, Greece. Well, I think you can see right away. It'll be up to you whether or not you like it. I myself like it more every time I encounter it, but you can see right away that is everyday conversation. The shipping business, whatever reckoning you choose to use, those things are not in the other two translations that we saw. It's much more conversational. That was a point that I made, years and years ago in my original, now lost review, and I still think it. The more I go at this, especially when I dig into the innards of the book, the more I notice that, and it feels a little bit guilty. Of course, I love Aubrey de Sélincourt's translation, and it has been all over the world with me. And I was actually the first form lover of George Rawlinson's brother. George Rawlinson had an even smarter brother. I was tight with the family. So it feels a little disloyal to say that I actually prefer this. And I don't know for sure that I do. There's a part of me that likes the rolling Edwardian cadences of Rawlinson. And there's a part of me that loves, and always will, the interwar clubman's conversational tone of Aubrey de Sélincourt. But certainly the part of me that likes this better than the other two is the teacher in me. Because this is a Herodotus that an undergraduate man, a young boy, a teenage boy, would actually read. Whereas Aubrey de Sélincourt, no, and Rawlinson certainly not. This is much closer to a first-person narrative novel. Which, keep in mind, I don't want to get too pedantic here. These Daily Penguins are certainly the last place in the world for Pete entry. But keep in mind, that is very close to how Herodotus himself would have thought of this. There was no distinction in his day. He would have thought, well, yes, I am doing something very similar to what the bard would do for Homer in your hall. Historians tended to think that way for 1,000 years. And it's only now that they have tenure and Ivy Leagues that they don't think they need to please anybody. I think this is very pleasing to the reading eye. It feels very direct and very conversational without losing any, really, of the authority. So that is your penguin for today, and also your question for today. I mean, it's a question you have to come across ever. Which of these do you want? There are other translations. There's Peter Green. There's one for Oxford World Classics, at least two more. But these are three major ones. The Rawlinson you will never find anymore. But the Aubrey de Sélincourt is, I believe, Penguin still makes a Black Spine Penguin Classic of their older translation of Herodotus, just in case. And certainly you can find this mass market paperback or the trade paperback updates in any used bookstore. And then there's this, which is not only the new Penguin Classic version of this, but which is in bookstores. You could order this at a bookstore. And it's a nice thing. It's a nice product. Fittingly nice. And the translations, I said that the big muscular movements of Herodotus are roughly the same. But it's in the little details that you will make or break an author like this. What happened with you when you were listening? Which did you prefer? But anyway, that is your penguin for today. Not just Herodotus, but the Tom Holland Herodotus. So we'll wrap this up for now, and maybe we'll continue next time, and maybe we won't. I'll be back. Thank you, too.